The morning at the military base started like any other. Soldiers are going about their routines, drills echoing in the background, when suddenly the atmosphere changed. At the center of it all was Steven Seagal, calm, composed, casually observing the ongoing exercises. Most people would have mistaken him for just another visitor. But then, out of nowhere, a high-ranking general strode up, his expression sharp and intense. Without warning, he grabbed Steven by the hair, pulling him forward in a way that made the entire base freeze. Phones appeared instantly as soldiers started recording. Nobody had expected this to happen. Whispers ran through the crowd. What is he doing? Why would he do that? Is Steven going to respond? Steven's reaction was anything but what people expected. He didn't shout, push back, or make any sudden moves. Instead, he blinked once, then slowly lifted his head, looking the general straight in the eyes. His face remained calm, his body relaxed. In that moment, the tension was almost unbearable. Every soldier, every bystander, was waiting to see what he would do next. The general, meanwhile, seemed frustrated that Steven wasn't reacting the way he intended. His grip tightened slightly, and his voice raised, demanding obedience and control. The base went silent, all attention fixed on the two figures in the center of the yard. Soldiers stepped back, unsure if they should intervene, while others continued recording every second, knowing this moment would be talked about for years. Steven, however, didn't flinch. He didn't escalate the situation. His calm demeanor alone started to shift the energy of the crowd. Soldiers began to whisper among themselves, "He's not scared. What's he planning? This is insane." The suspense was thick, almost tangible. At that moment, viewers watching at home would feel it too. The tension, the unpredictability, the silent standoff between two strong personalities. Everyone at the base was mentally holding their breath. And the truth was, nobody knew what Steven Seagal would do next. But one thing was clear: whatever happened, it would leave a lasting impact on everyone present. No one could believe what just happened, and Steven's next move would shock everyone. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected. Soldiers continued to whisper, cameras' phones raised in unison, capturing every second of the intense standoff. The general's grip on Steven Seagal's hair was firm, and his voice carried authority, echoing across the base. "Listen to me. You will do as I say," he barked, eyes narrowed, expecting an immediate reaction. Steven, however, remained calm. He didn't resist physically, didn't raise his voice, and didn't show fear. Instead, he looked the general squarely in the eyes, the kind of gaze that could disarm anyone without a single word. His body language was relaxed, yet confident, a subtle, almost invisible force that made it clear he wasn't going to be intimidated. Around them, the soldiers were frozen. Some were unsure if they should step in. Others simply watched, mesmerized by the unfolding drama. Phones were recording from every angle. The chatter of the crowd mixed with the hum of anticipation. You could almost feel the tension pressing down on the entire base, a quiet energy that made it impossible to look away. The general, frustrated by the lack of response, stepped closer. "Do you even understand who you're dealing with?" he demanded. His tone was sharp, designed to assert dominance, but Steven's composure never faltered. The silence from Steven's side was louder than any shouted words could have been. It was in that silence that the soldiers began to realize something. The situation was not going as the general expected, as the standoff continued. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd. "Who is he? Why isn't he reacting?" Some of the younger soldiers exchanged nervous glances. Others couldn't hide their curiosity, peeking from behind equipment to get a better view. Every subtle movement from Steven made everyone lean in slightly, hearts pounding with anticipation. And then, almost instinctively, Steven tilted his head just slightly and looked around at the base. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning, the kind of quiet confidence that makes people stop and pay attention. At that moment, the soldiers' focus shifted from the general to Steven, their minds racing, wondering what he would do next. Before we continue, tell me in the comments right now, which country or city are you watching this from? I want to see how global this moment feels. Drop it below while the suspense continues. The general, sensing his authority was slipping, tried to escalate verbally. He raised his voice, repeated orders, and attempted to shame Steven. But the more aggressive he became, the calmer Steven appeared. It was as if every shout, every tense step forward, only reinforced Steven's presence, quiet but commanding. Soldiers watching felt their own anticipation build. Some even held their breath, waiting for the inevitable move that would change everything. By now, every corner of the base was watching. The dynamic had shifted. Steven's calm was starting to influence the crowd. The whispers grew. He's not reacting. He's in control. The energy changed from shock to awe. Even the general seemed slightly off balance, caught in the tension that Steven's composed demeanor created. The atmosphere is electric, almost unbearable. Viewers at home feel the suspense themselves, wondering, what will Steven Seagal do next? Will he confront the general, walk away, or completely turn the tables? The base had gone completely silent. Soldiers lined up along the edges of the training ground, their phones still recording, their eyes fixed on the tense standoff between Steven Seagal and the general. The sun glinted off their helmets, but nobody seemed to notice the heat or the light. All focus was on the two central figures. The general's frustration was growing. He had expected fear, compliance, or at least some sign of intimidation from Steven. Instead, Steven remained unmoved, his calm demeanor radiating confidence without a single word. Every flicker of movement from him, every subtle shift in posture, was amplified in the eyes of everyone present. The tension was thick enough to touch, and soldiers could feel their own heartbeats accelerate. "Do you think you can ignore my orders?" the general barked, stepping closer. His hand still gripped Steven's hair, though now it was clear he was trying to assert control rather than actually harm. Sweat began to form on his brow as Steven continued to hold his gaze, unflinching, like a rock in the middle of storm. Around them, whispers started to ripple through the soldiers. "He's not scared. How is he not reacting? This is insane. What is he going to do?" Every eye was glued to Steven, every mind racing to predict the next move. The psychological weight of the moment was intense. It was no longer just a physical standoff. It had become a mental battle. The general, realizing that words alone were not working, tried a new tactic. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a threatening growl designed to intimidate. But Steven's body language remained relaxed, unthreatened. His breathing was steady, almost meditative, and his hands stayed open, non-aggressive. Soldiers watching began to notice something remarkable. The calm of one man was beginning to dominate the energy of the crowd. Steven's eyes briefly scanned the crowd, and in that instant, everyone felt it, the unspoken command of his presence. Soldiers instinctively took a small step back, giving him space without even realizing it. The general's posture stiffened. His authority, once absolute, was starting to falter under the weight of Steven's silent confidence. And then Steven finally spoke, softly yet firmly. "Respect isn't earned through fear," he said, his voice calm but carrying across the base like a controlled storm. "It comes from integrity, patience, and understanding. You may have authority, but it doesn't give you the right to intimidate anyone." The words struck the soldiers like lightning. Some gasped audibly. The general's jaw tightened. He had not expected to be challenged in this way. The air seemed to vibrate with anticipation as everyone waited for the general's next move. If you were watching this live, what would you do in Steven's place? Comment your answer below. Fight back or stay calm. Let's see who would make the right move. The general's hands trembled slightly, his confidence shaken. Soldiers whispered to each other, exchanging looks that said everything. He's winning mentally. Even those who had initially sided with the general were now questioning his actions. Steven's calmness had turned the tide without a single act of violence. Minutes felt like hours. Every heartbeat, every small gesture mattered. The base had become a psychological arena, a mental chessboard where the calm, measured strategy of one man was slowly but surely overpowering the brute force of authority the tension had reached its peak. The general's frustration was visible. The soldiers' anticipation was unbearable, and the stage was perfectly set for the revelation that would change everything. The audience watching at home is now emotionally trapped, wondering what will happen next, feeling the tension of every movement, every word, every pause. The standoff had stretched longer than anyone at the base could remember. Soldiers were frozen in their positions, phones raised, recording every subtle movement, every shift in energy. The general, still holding on to Steven's hair, was beginning to show visible signs of frustration. He had expected a reaction, any reaction, but Steven's calm, measured composure had thrown the entire situation off balance. As the tension built, something remarkable began to happen. A soldier at the edge of the crowd, eyes widening in disbelief, whispered to the person next to him, "Wait, that's Steven Seagal." The words spread like wildfire. "Steven Seagal? The actor and martial artist?" Another whispered. "No way, it really is him." Soon, whispers rippled through the entire base. Eyes darted back and forth, trying to confirm what everyone was starting to suspect. Phones were now pointed not just at the general, but at Steven, capturing the moment from every angle. The general, however, seemed completely unaware. He tightened his grip, leaning closer with a sneer, believing that he still had the upper hand. But the soldiers around him were now shifting subtly. Their attention split between the aggressive general and the man standing silently in front of him. The man who suddenly carried an aura of authority far stronger than the one wielded by the general himself. Steven didn't announce who he was. He didn't need to. His presence, his calm yet commanding energy, was enough to start turning the tide. Whispers turned into soft murmurs of admiration. Soldiers exchanged glances, their voices low but filled with excitement. "That's him. The world knows him. He's not just an actor. He's a legend in martial arts." The general, sensing the shift in the energy around him, started to falter. His sneer wavered. He could feel the eyes of the base on him, and the murmurs of recognition only made him more aware of how dramatically the dynamic had changed. He realized, too late, that the crowd no longer supported his intimidation tactics. Their attention was now firmly on Steven, silently rallying behind his calm defiance. Steven's calmness didn't waver. He remained respectful, never using his fame as a weapon. Instead, he subtly leveraged it through presence and poise. Each soldier watching felt a mix of awe and tension. The silence itself had become a tool, heightening anticipation. Every heartbeat in the base seemed to echo with the question, "What will he do next?" Some soldiers instinctively stepped back, giving him space without anyone saying a word. The whispers grew louder, now tinged with admiration. "He's not reacting. He's controlling the situation without lifting a hand." The energy of the base had shifted completely. What started as a moment of aggression had become a demonstration of calm strength and control. The general tried to recover, attempting another verbal jab, but the power of recognition was undeniable. Steven's aura of authority, combined with the collective awareness of the soldiers, had turned the tables. The psychological advantage was now firmly in Steven's corner. Viewers at home are completely drawn in. They feel the tension, the admiration, and the mental shift that's taking place in real time. The stage is set for the next phase, when Steven begins to assert his calm authority in a way that leaves the general and everyone else stunned. The crowd knew it. The man standing there was no ordinary visitor. And what he would do next would leave everyone in shock. The atmosphere at the base had shifted completely. The general's initial authority had begun to falter, his previous confidence replaced with subtle frustration. Soldiers were watching intently, whispers still running through the crowd, and every phone camera trained on the scene. Steven Seagal remained calm, his eyes steady, his posture relaxed, yet every movement carried quiet confidence that seemed to command the attention of everyone present. For a moment, it seemed like nothing could break the silence. Then Steven spoke. His voice was measured, soft yet resonant, carrying effortlessly across the yard. "Respect," he began, "is not demanded through fear or intimidation. True respect comes from integrity, from how you treat others, even when no one is watching. The words hit the soldiers like a shockwave. Heads turned, some nodding subtly, others whispering agreements. The general's expression hardened, tried to regain control, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. Soldiers who had been recording the encounter now lowered their phones slightly, caught up in the tension and gravity of the words. Steven didn't need to shout. Every pause, every deliberate glance, every subtle gesture amplified the weight of his presence. His calm voice seemed to fill the space, creating an invisible boundary that the general could no longer cross without exposing his own overreaction. The general tried again, raising his voice and pointing accusingly at Steven. "Do you think you can speak to me like that? You will follow orders." Steven's response was precise and controlled. Orders should guide, not humiliate. Authority is earned through fairness, not through fear. Intimidation is temporary. Respect is lasting. Soldiers in the crowd leaned forward, as if trying to absorb every word. The murmurs of recognition from earlier grew louder. They weren't just impressed by who Steven was, but by how he carried himself under pressure. There was no aggression, no retaliation, just a calm, commanding presence that made the general's attempts at control seem smaller with each passing second. Some soldiers began to exchange glances, quietly impressed. Others whispered, "He's not just famous, he's a master at handling situations like this." The base was now united in attention, every person silently witnessing a display of composure and strategic restraint. If you were in this situation, would you have the patience to stay calm like Steven, or would you react immediately? Comment below. Let's see who could handle this pressure. The general's hands shook slightly, a visible sign that his authority was slipping. His words grew sharper, his gestures more frantic, but Steven didn't waver. Instead, he maintained eye contact, his tone steady, his presence unshakable. Each soldier watching began to understand that this was more than just a confrontation. It was a lesson in mental strength, emotional control, and the power of respect. Steven's words continued to resonate. It's easy to command through fear. It's far harder to lead with understanding. True leadership is measured by the dignity you show to others, not the intimidation you display. By now, the entire base was tense with anticipation. Even those who had initially been on the general's side were captivated by Steven's calm authority. The power dynamic had reversed. The general's attempts at aggression had only highlighted Steven's strength, and the crowd could see it clearly. Viewers at home feel the suspense, the admiration, and the quiet intensity of the standoff. Everyone is waiting, wondering, what will happen next when the truth about Steven's identity fully hits the base? In that moment, it was clear composure and intelligence had begun to triumph over brute force, and the revelation that would follow would shock everyone even further. The standoff had reached a new level of tension. Soldiers were on edge, some holding their phones like lifelines, capturing every second of the drama. The general's frustration was now unmistakable. He had tried intimidation, shouting, and aggressive gestures, but Steven Seagal remained unshaken, calm, and commanding. The atmosphere in the base was electric, a mix of anticipation, awe, and disbelief. Then the moment came. A junior officer who had been observing from the sidelines leaned toward the commanding officer nearby and whispered something. The words spread like wildfire. "Sir, that's Steven Seagal. The actor, martial artist, the man everyone knows." Instantly, heads turned. Soldiers gasped, whispers rippled through the crowd, and phones lifted higher to capture the shocking revelation. "No way, it's really him," someone murmured. "He's the one, the legend himself." The general froze. His hands loosened involuntarily, and a flush of embarrassment spread across his face. The authority he had wielded so confidently moments ago was now under scrutiny, not just by Steven, but by every soldier and observer present. The crowd had shifted. The energy was no longer in his favor. Every whisper, every reaction highlighted the disparity between intention and outcome. Steven, as always, remained composed. He didn't smirk, he didn't gloat, and he didn't use his fame to humiliate the general. Instead, his calm demeanor amplified the impact of the revelation. The soldiers' admiration grew with each second. They weren't just witnessing a confrontation. They were witnessing a masterclass in poise, dignity, and strategic calm under pressure. The general tried to speak, but his voice wavered. I didn't realize, he stammered, the words barely audible. His attempts to regain authority only highlighted the previous mistakes, making the embarrassment even more visible. The crowd sensed the change immediately. The tide had turned completely. Steven's response was quiet, yet commanding. Respect should be given to everyone, not just those who command it by fear. Leadership is shown through integrity, not intimidation. The soldiers erupted in quiet murmurs of approval. Some nodded, some whispered to each other. He handled that perfectly without a single act of aggression. Others recorded the words, knowing that this moment would be remembered for a long time. Have you ever seen someone completely outsmart a stronger opponent without using violence? Type yes or no in the comments. Let's see who's paying attention. The general's face remained red with embarrassment. His earlier threats, now meaningless in the wake of Steven's calm authority and the soldiers' growing admiration. Every movement he made was now watched, analyzed, and silently judged. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. Soldiers began exchanging looks, some in awe, some with relief, all recognizing the lesson in front of them. The base had witnessed a transformation. What began as a tense confrontation had evolved into a display of respect, mental strength, and dignity. Steven didn't bask in the attention. He simply walked a step back, maintained eye contact with the general, and allowed the moment to settle. His message was clear. Authority and aggression may intimidate temporarily, but composure, intelligence, and respect command lasting admiration. By the end of Part 6, the audience at home is emotionally and mentally engaged, completely drawn into the story. They feel the satisfaction of seeing justice done without violence, the tension of the general's embarrassment, and the admiration for Steven's calm control. The resolution and lasting impact of this unforgettable moment. The base had witnessed something extraordinary, a lesson in respect, patience, and composure that would be remembered by everyone present. And the world watching would never forget it either. The tension at the base slowly began to fade, replaced by a mix of awe, respect, and whispered conversations. Soldiers lowered their phones, though many still held them, reviewing the footage they had captured, knowing that this moment would be replayed countless times. The general, once full of authority and aggression, now stood awkwardly, his earlier intimidation completely undone by Steven Seagal's calm control. Steven, however, remained composed. He didn't gloat, didn't point out the general's embarrassment, and didn't let the attention change his demeanor. Instead, he took a slow, steady breath and glanced at the soldiers around him, acknowledging them with a subtle nod. His message was clear without words. Composure, respect, and dignity matter far more than brute force or shouting. The crowd of soldiers began to applaud quietly at first, then more loudly, some whistling, some cheering. Phones captured the sound of admiration filling the air, a stark contrast to the tension from earlier. The energy had completely shifted. What had begun as a confrontation became a lesson in respect, intelligence, and self-control. As the videos spread online, the story went viral within hours. Soldiers shared it with friends and family. Clips appeared across social media platforms. Millions of people watching Steven Seagal handle the situation with grace and authority. Comments poured in from around the world, praising his calmness, courage, and the way he turned a tense, potentially dangerous moment into a demonstration of respect and leadership. Even beyond the viral videos, the incident sparked conversations. People discussed how intelligence and patience can overcome aggression. They shared stories of similar situations in their own lives, reflecting on moments when staying calm made all the difference. Steven's approach became an example, a lesson for anyone facing intimidation or pressure. The general faced scrutiny for his actions, though the focus wasn't on punishment as much as it was on the lesson learned. His moment of embarrassment served as a reminder that authority without understanding, respect, or composure can crumble under its own weight. Soldiers and viewers alike took away a clear message. Strength is not just physical. It is mental, emotional, and strategic. If you believe that calmness, respect, and intelligence are stronger than aggression, type respect in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs to see it. Steven walked away from the base eventually, his presence still commanding attention without needing to assert it. The soldiers continued their routines, but the memory of the confrontation lingered. Even after leaving, the lesson remained. Composure can turn any moment around. Intelligence can overcome aggression, and respect is earned through behavior, not intimidation. By the end of the story, viewers feel a strong emotional payoff. They experience the tension, the standoff, the subtle psychological battle, and finally, the satisfying resolution where calm, authority, and dignity triumph. The narrative leaves the audience inspired and mentally engaged, perfectly suited for comments, shares, and discussions. The entire base and the world watching learned the same lesson. Real power isn't in strength or fear. It's in respect, patience, and integrity.